Welcome to Real World, Real Talk with Dr. D.Z. Cofield. The show represents captivating conversations and insightful information to encourage and inspire you with all you need to become the best you can possibly be. And now, your host for Real World, Real Talk, Dr. D.Z. Cofield.
Welcome to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, D.Z. Cofield, Senior Pastor of the Good Hope Missionary Baptist Church, and I'm honored to be with you on today. Let me say to everybody that I have not spoken to, Happy New Year. I hope and pray this is a great year for you. I hope as you turn the page on 2022, that 2023 is the best year ever. And remember, if you want to see a change in what's happening in 2023, the easiest place to make a change is in yourself, not in other people. So don't look for other people to be different. Make the commitment to be different yourself. Now, just a couple of housekeeping matters before we get started. If you like to follow me during the week, you can follow me on IG, Instagram at DZ Cofield. You can follow me on Twitter at DZ Cofield, and you can follow me on Facebook at DZ Cofield. Today, even though we're in January, we're going to do the year in review of 2022. So much happened in 2022, and much of it is spilling over into 2023. And so we want to take a look back so that we can take a proper look forward. And I'm excited to welcome into Real World, Real Talk, my brother from another mother, Brother Oswald Walker. He is the associate editor at the Defender Network. He's been my guest before. I've been a guest with him, and I'm really grateful for his friendship and our relationship. Welcome, Brother Oswald. What's up, man?
How you doing, sir? How you doing, brother?
I'm great, man. Happy New Year to you and your family and everybody.
To you as well.
Everybody at the Shrine, man, doing good.
We're good. We're good over on MLK Boulevard.
All right,
how
man.
About the good people at Good Hope?
Man, we trying to hold it down over here. You know, when I got here, folk told me that Good Hope wasn't really in Third Ward, because we was on McGregor, you know what I mean? And I'm like, look here, y'all don't understand. You may not think so, but other folk, they claim me as y'all. No, you with them Third Ward folks. So I'm in the tray for real. But no, everything is good, man. We can't complain. Got some exciting things going on at the church, and looking forward to 2023 being our best year ever. So the year in review, man. So I got to tell you, when I read the Defender edition of the year in review, and we do this every year. I think we've done this the last 2 years together. Right. What was amazing to me was the quote of your friend who talked about the white lash that we would experience in our society coming out of the election of President Obama and President Trump being, the attempt of people who worship at the altar of the religion of whiteness to say, hey, we've got to resuscitate this idea of white supremacy.
And 2022 was that year, man. We saw it left and right. Lord have mercy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, man, let's talk about the year in review. We'll talk about some of the top local and state stories. We'll talk about some of the national stories, sports stories. We'll talk about those that we said goodbye to in 2022, and then talk a little bit about how we move forward in 2023. First and foremost, and I thought it was interesting. A number of things happened, and there are some major national stories that we can talk about. But I want to talk about two positions that have been filled on the college level here. And that's the new president at Prairie View A&M University, and then the new president at Rice University, which I found very refreshing. Still kind of jury out, not sure, where the brother's coming from, because, we all know being black is not enough, being a child of the diaspora is not enough if that's not where your heart is. But talk about those two moves as we said farewell to the former president of Prairie View, Dr. Ruth, as I love to call her, and moving forward now with the new leadership.
And that's the one that stood out to me, Prairie View, just because, Dr. Ruth Simmons is, and will always be literally a legend in terms of, her professional life, her passion for excellence, and her unwillingness to accept less than at PV. I remember the Defender, one of our community events was, every year they had the Labor Day Classic, TSU and PV, where we had the President's Classic just before that game, where the presidents of TSU and PV, and the president at the time was Ruth Simmons, where they get together, they talk in front of the community about issues, et cetera. And she hammered home the point that, when she got to Prairie View, she was like, we are not accepting less than. Why on earth would we do that to our students? And one of the first things she did was ask, where is the African American Studies program? She helped to found African American Studies programs at various Ivy League schools, this, that, and the other. And she said, it is a darn shame that we don't have one at PV. Well, now they do. And so I guess that's a call out to TSU that still doesn't have an African American Studies program. But the fact that she is moving on, and we always knew that she was, but it still kind of pained me to see that.
Yeah.
But we do have now Dr. LeGrand, who has taken her place, and of course everyone is wishing her well, but she's got some huge shoes to fill. Brother man over at Rice, well, you've kind of alluded to it already. When Rice University was founded, it was founded on the premise that it would be all white, that there would be no blacks allowed on that campus. And so to have a brother ascend to the CEO, the top spot at that university, was news in and of itself. But like you said, simply being black ain't enough. And so, our hope and prayer is that his heart is with the community. But we need to find out.
Yeah. I think a part of the thing that I noticed is he's an immigrant. Do you know what country he's from?
Was it Haiti? You know what?
I believe
I do not remember, but I think it's Haiti.
Yeah. And it's always interesting because even the most racist white people will accept immigrants before they accept Americans of African descent.
Yeah.
I can remember even when I was in seminary, and I made a fuss about it because one of the older white professors was talking about how overjoyed he was to see so many international students. And they welcomed international students, including from Africa and the Caribbean, when it was still illegal for me as an African American to walk on that campus. And, so I started asking questions like, hey, are you happy to see me too? I just want to know if you're happy to see me, but again, we'll see what happens.
When you said that, and I'm dating myself here, I thought of the movie Bingo Long, Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings, when Richard Pryor was a brother, but he was acting like he was from one of those Latin American countries, because that was the only way he was going to be accepted and hopefully get into the major leagues. And then Harvard, just a couple of weeks ago, they announced, their first black president, and she's also, I think, from Haiti as well.
Yeah, it's amazing to see that. I was thinking about one of the comedians. She's African, Afro-British, I guess. And she was pulled over by a police officer in the U.S. driving. And when she gave them her license, they heard a British accent. And the officer gave her back her license and apologized and said, "Oh, I thought you were African American."
No.
Yeah. So I'm thinking I may need to practice my British accent. I need to watch some episodes of The Midwife and catch some other stuff, man. Downton Abbey and some other stuff, man, and work on that accent.
All of that.
All of that.
But we can't let that pit ourselves against each other, just because of the way other folk seek to do that, right?
Right. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. But again, it's that perception that white America has of foreigners who are of darker complexion, as opposed to those of us who are native to this country. Uvalde was one of the local stories that made national news, as we saw 19 elementary school children and 2 teachers tragically killed. So much has been said. Investigations are still going on. People are still, being held accountable around this. Talk about the impact of that story, especially when people started saying things like, if it were a school of predominantly white children, they would have went in, and they wouldn't have gone the other way. They wouldn't have waited, and waited to get an okay. Officers would have went in and did what they needed to do. As a reporter, and you've seen tragedies, before, what was your reaction to that?
My reaction was those folk who are making that projection are exactly right, because we've seen it before where, police officers do not waste a second. They go in guns a-blazing to rescue white children who are under attack. But this predominantly Latinx community didn't get that same level of protection, and it's crazy because that community traditionally has been so pro police, but the police did not come to their aid. Those stories of these elementary school children on the phone, on calling 911 while the shooter is in the school, and the officers outside for, I think, over an hour. Hundreds of officers. I think it was almost 400 police officers outside doing nothing. Is chilling, but it also, interestingly enough, raised the question about how we just automatically ascribe courage and valor to police officers. And at that point, the police officers were literally having to hold back parents from going in and trying to rescue their children. And I think 1 or 2 of the parents actually got through and were able to go into the school with the shooter there, find their children and bring them out. And still the officers were outside. But the thing I remember about that is in terms of the national consciousness, it made people forget about a shooting that happened, I think, just like a week or 2 before that in Buffalo, New York,
Right.
Where the shooter walked into a grocery store and just started killing people, several of them African American.
Yeah. Looked at the white cashier and apologized.
Lord have mercy. Right.
And then shoots the black, grandmother, who's just putting groceries in the back of a car. Yeah. Just a level of insanity that, quite honestly, I'm not sure we have seen before. We can talk about the effects of COVID and mental wellness and grief and depression and everything that's being dealt with in our country. We're seeing it with the road rage incidents, including the killing of Pastor Ronald Mouton of the East Bethel Missionary Baptist Church, brother that I knew and had great respect for, and the community had great respect for him. Man, I can only tell you, I was shocked and blown away, when I heard about his killing. And then as the facts began to unveil, to see road rage taken to that extent.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, man, I have been the perpetrator of road rage. This was years ago, man. Years ago. And I was driving, and this lady just kept on blowing the horn. I was in New York City, and the woman kept blowing the horn and, started howling and screaming. And man, before I knew it, I had jumped out of my car and was standing at the driver's door of her vehicle, shouting back at her to shut her mouth and blah, 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 blah. And I literally like looked around, was like, dude, what are you doing out of your car? Would you get back in your vehicle, please?
Yeah.
And this was years ago. I just recognize how easy it is to lose your cool. And with everything that people are going through, inflation and job loss and, housing crisis and interest
COVID still here.
Right. COVID's still here. I'm like, man, this is absolutely insane. But then we saw the senseless killing of one of the Migos rappers, Takeoff. And
yeah,
what there's been a lot of senseless killing. And we say senseless killing because, for you and for me, we're a little older and we're like, that beef ain't worth killing somebody over. You know what I mean? Just, whatever the person said or whatever, man, move on. But we're seeing a lot of lives of young people being taken. For you, not just as an associate editor at the Defender, but as a pastor at the Shrine, how do you see us, man, being able to address this and deal with this in our community?
I'm encouraged by the voices that continue to stand up and speak out about the value of Black lives. And one organization in person in particular, the Honey Brown Hope Foundation, led by Tammy Lane Campbell, she has kept the fight of Darius Elam, who has been in jail for almost 40 years for a crime that the evidence says he did not commit. And the brother himself, he says that. And so the way that she and her organization continue to speak up and speak out, for Black lives is appreciative. I'm appreciative of that. But also just the grassroots organizations and churches and faith institutions. Our good brother, I was going to call him Dr. Abdul Halim Muhammad, Derek Muhammad, with his Smarten Up Black Male Summit that he does twice a year. The incredible work that you do, Kofi Taharka over at NBuff, of course, Deloitte Parker and the Shape Community Center family. All of these entities and individuals and organizations are, Lord have mercy, how can I forget Seha, right across the street from the Shrine. All of these entities doing incredible work to pour into our young people, to teach them to respect and honor the God in themselves, so that they treat themselves with respect and treat others the way that they would want to be treated. And that work, I guess I'm leaning towards the side of celebrating those that are doing that good work, but recognizing there's so much more that has to be done, because that brother from Migos being shot and killed. What sense does that make? And
Right.
Then Jalen Randall and Roderick Brooks being shot and killed by police. These things make no sense. But we've got to stand as a community and pour into each other the value of our lives. But then we also have to have another conversation about when other folk come in to our community and mistreat us. We've got to develop like something that provides consequences and repercussions, because it seems like they will not stop kicking us in the behind until we break that foot off or do something.
Yeah. I was reminded of the sermon that the late Vernon John preached on why it's easier to kill a Black man than a rabbit. And
oh my gosh.
His commentary was that in Alabama, it's easy to kill a Black man than a rabbit, because shooting a rabbit has seasons, and you can't shoot a rabbit out of season. But it seems like killing a Black men are never out of season. And
Wow.
it was a sermon. As a matter of fact, it was interesting because he set up speakers and played it out in the community when he did it. And the sheriff and his white deputies were all there telling him not to do it, and he went forward and did it anyway. So let's move to our national news. Let's start with first the appointment of Ketanji Brown Jackson, her historic appointment to the Supreme Court. We saw the results of overloading the Supreme Court with right-wing judges. We can't say white because Clarence Thomas is part of that contingent. But when you overload one side or the other, the sense of balance that's lost. We saw Roe v. Wade overturned. I'm just saying, man, this has been coming. This has been coming. This mentality to go back and take us back. The good old days that were not good for many of us of darker hue has been going on for a long time. And now women have fallen into that group as well in terms of the going back.
And with the white nationalist takeover of the U.S. Supreme Court, it further highlights the fact that those in positions of power, be it elected positions or positions like the Supreme Court, are so off base with the majority of U.S. citizens. The majority of U.S. citizens want gun reform. The majority of U.S. citizens, whether Democrat or Republican, believe in a woman's right to choose. And so it is this hyper conservative almost cabal that has taken over the U.S. Supreme Court. And so Ketanji Brown Jackson, she represents a voice of the people. And so her presence is powerful, but the court is still grossly tilted towards positions that are not consistent with what the majority of the U.S. citizenry want and what they've spoken out for and what they voted for. And so it'll be interesting to see how the U.S. Supreme Court rules on some really huge cases moving forward.
Yeah, I think, for me, what's really dangerous is, you see people, for example, like a Lindsey Graham, who in the hearings for Ketanji Brown Jackson talks about how qualified she is. I mean, just more qualified than virtually any other candidate that they've had for the Supreme Court, and just lauding all these compliments on her. And he says, "But I'm still going to vote no." And you're like, what lunacy, man? Have we really gotten to that place that I'm going to acknowledge that this person is tremendously qualified and is going to add so much value, but I'm still voting no?
The crazy thing is, at least he acknowledged the fact that she is more qualified than most people that are already serving. But you had a whole army of people from that side of the political spectrum who were questioning her qualifications.
Right.
Right. But that speaks to how folks see Black people in general, but more specifically Black women. And when we talk about the famous quote from Malcolm X, the least respected, least protected person in America is the Black woman, I think of Shanquella Robinson, who was brutally beaten and finally died. I think of when Roe v. Wade was overturned, every statistic shows that Black women are going to feel the brunt of that more so than any other group. I think of Megan Thee Stallion, a sister with a heart for the community. So many things that she does that she doesn't have to do for the well-being of other people. She gets shot and people attack her as if she was a mass shooter. And so it really says something about where this country is in
Yeah.
terms of the level of respect for Black women.
Yeah. One of the national news stories that hit that I don't think really played out the way people thought it would was this national student loan relief. And the debt piece. I think many people, when they first heard it, were like, whoa, he gonna wipe out all that. I'm gonna get loan forgiveness for everything, and when it came out, $10,000, 20 things, like, what, man, that's all, just $10,000, maybe 20, like, oh my God, I got $200,000 worth of debt. And 10 is 10, 20 is 20 is, better than nothing. But it seemed like to me there was almost a disappointment when the details came out.
Yeah.
I don't know, what was your take on that?
I remember the excitement. I remember the initial excitement. I remember the disappointment, but there was also this moment I felt and I heard from a lot of our readers. Well, we're on the right track, and they saw it as a strategic move to continue on that path to eventually, wiping out all student debt. But the other thing that stood out to me was, again, the vast majority of the American citizenry were all for that. And here comes members of the Republican Party holding up the stop sign and putting a halt on that. And so it's still in limbo right now.
Yeah, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield. We're doing the year in review, 2022. We're going to come back in just a moment with my guest, Oswald Walker, and we're going to talk about, among other things, the slap that was heard around the world and some other really monumental events that took place in 2022. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and I want to thank you for being with me on our year in review show with my guest, my brother from another mother, Brother Oswald Walker. So we're looking at 2022 and seeing, what was happening and what are some of the seminal moments in 2022. No question, for me, looking back at the history of our country in the midst of the white lash that we have seen, and some would say the war that's going on between some of the African American and Latino or Latinx community, as we're seeing that play out, to see Representative Hakeem Jeffries, representative from Brooklyn, New York, nominated by a Mexican American from California to assume leadership as the minority House leader, positioning him to, if the Democrats take over the majority in the next election, to become the Speaker of the House, and the first African-American to hold that position. Talk about the significance of that. I thought it was really kind of cool when you mentioned, his quoting of Biggie Smalls when he spoke in the impeachment proceedings against President Trump. I would venture to say that that might be the first time Biggie was quoted in the House, the hallowed chambers of the House of Representatives. But talk about the significance of this brother, who by all accounts is a real brother. I've had an opportunity to meet him and talk to him, not extensively, but just seemed to be a really, really good brother, really solid brother who has a heart for the community and a heart for people in general.
Well, I think you said it right there. The fact that you said earlier that skin color is not enough. It's where your heart is and where your actions are and where they lead you. And with Hakeem Jeffries, his heart, his actions speak for themselves. They scream that this brother's not only qualified, but he's standing for us. And the fact that position, correct me if I'm wrong, it's third in line, fourth in line to the presidency.
Right.
That's no joke. And the Speaker of the House, as you said, if the Democrats, take back the majority of the House in 2024, they wield immense power in terms of what's voted on, what's not, in terms of gathering the votes together to vote a specific way, to push a specific agenda. And so to have someone who has a history of speaking up for the least, the last, and the lost, who is not so removed as so many of these folk have been before, it really bodes well for where we are going, or at least where we have the potential to go politically.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's tremendous. So let's talk about entertainment, and I want to talk about a couple of things and put them in context together. So let's talk first about the slap scene around the world. It seems like, man, it happened so long ago when Will Smith struck comedian Chris Rock, who was making fun of his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith. And let's juxtapose that with Cheryl Lee Ralph, who by all accounts gave one of the most, if not the most inspirational, spot on speeches when she won her Emmy for Best Supporting Actress in the series Abbott Elementary. Talk about those two kind of bookend moments for our community as we watched.
The way I would frame the conversation is one hid and one spotlighted. So the slap, when that happened, it literally hid so much of that evening that should have been a celebration. The fact that it was the first brother to produce an Academy Awards, and in the way it was going, it was a celebration the entire night, and it was going beautifully. And then that happened, and we don't know if he's ever going to have that opportunity to produce it again. And there were so many other wins for the culture, like Questlove and his documentary about that
Summer
music.
Soul. Yeah, that was
Summer Soul.
Yeah, and that was a great documentary. Man, that was
Lord
great.
have mercy. And but people forget that he won that. And there were so many other of those moments. And I can't remember who it was. Was it Danny Glover or someone won one of those honorary Academy Awards? But no one remembers any of that because that slap, that moment. And there's many different ways that conversation could go. But I like to focus on, I would challenge our listeners to go back and see some of the accomplishments or some of the awards that were given to us that celebrated the culture that evening that were overshadowed by that moment. In fact, the Defender did an article that tried to highlight those moments because they were literally lost. But on the flip side of that, when you talk about Cheryl Lee Ralph, what she did was shine a spotlight, and not just on her. I mean, I've been a fan of her since, the Mighty Quinn, and she was one of the original Dream Girls. So I've been a personal fan of Cheryl Lee Ralph, loving all of her work. But she shined a spotlight not only on herself, but on the incredible show that I love, Abbott Elementary, being an educator. You're an educator, married to an educator, so I'm sure y'all rock the show as well. But shining a spotlight on all these incredible Black performers, and more specifically Black female performers, who do this Herculean work, but rarely get their flowers, while they are alive. And so you were so right. That was one of the most powerful moments of the year. And I love the fact that she did not keep all that acclaim and celebrity just for herself. She tried to spread it out to make sure that everyone knew there are all kinds of other sisters and brothers out there doing great work.
Yeah, absolutely. The Woman King and Wakanda Forever.
Can I say one thing before we go there?
Absolutely.
About the slap, because if we're talking about the slap, when you say that, we all think Will Smith, Chris Rock, but hell, the January 6th committee work, that was a slap. That was an awakening for a lot of people, probably not for Black folk, because we've been saying it forever.
Sure.
That there are forces out there that do not want to count our votes, that do not think we are full citizens, and are willing to do anything, even overthrow a presidential election. But to me, that was a slap in the face of democracy, but that's a whole nother conversation.
No, absolutely. All right. So the Woman King and Wakanda Forever. So I've got to tell you, man, there was a grief, a mourning that I went through when Chadwick Boseman died. Like, I felt that thing, and I didn't know him, never met him. But man, I felt that thing just for what that brother represented, and it was like, wow. I left Wakanda Forever, man, inspired. I left feeling better. And I'm going to say this to those of you who went to see it. If you left and you didn't stay until the final credits, you might have missed the best part of the movie.
Shame on you.
Oh my God. Because man, when the credits started rolling, people started leaving. My wife was like, all right, you ready, baby? I was like, no, hold up. Because they usually, the Marvel folk usually stick something in there. Man, we sat there and dude, I started crying, man, when that last scene came with his son. I was like, yes. Oh man. I'm like, I'm back on the saddle again. So, but let's talk about the importance of those movies and the positive representation of our people and our culture.
So with Wakanda Forever, I think Ryan Coogler needs to be celebrated from here and beyond for the work that he did, given almost an impossible task to follow up 2018's Black Panther, and then for the brother who literally was born for that role, Chadwick Boseman, to pass on to the ancestors and still, keep that mantle moving forward. That was incredible. The way that he brought in the culture of the indigenous people through the story of Namor, the Submariner, was incredible on another level. The fact that the sisters were, again, taking care of business was incredible on even another level. But he purposefully said that the movie was supposed to give us space to grieve. We, as those who are watching the film, but also the actors and actresses that were in those roles, that everyone needed that moment to grieve, and it was absolutely stunning. There were folk who were protesting, saying that they weren't going to go see the movie for this, that, and the third. Most of them were saying because they wanted the character of Black Panther to be recast. And I'm one of those people who wants it to be recast eventually, but I don't think that was the moment for it.
Yeah.
Right. But oddly enough, The Woman King was also another film that had Black folk who were protesting even before the movie came out. And to me, it's just ironic, because we will go see anybody's movie made by anybody and won't say anything But for Black movies, that's when we want to step up and we want to protest. And one of the main reasons folk wanted to protest The Woman King is because it focuses on the Agoji, the women warriors of the ancient Dahomey nation, upon which the Dora Milaje of Black Panther were fashioned. They were involved in the slave trade, and so people's like, I'm not going to go celebrate them. But the movie did not run from that reality at all. It hit it head on, and it also shined a light on the fact that within that nation, they were having those conversations about getting out of that trade. And I can't remember which scholar, ancient African civilization scholar, said that he literally cried watching The Woman King because it was so accurate the way everything was depicted. But not only that, it was a story of empowerment, and not only for women, empowerment, and showing the fact that we have to work together, sisters and brothers, side by side, if we want to move forward in power. Both of those movies had me in my feelings, as folk like to say. Both powerful cinema.
Yeah. I think what's amazing is, we talk about sometimes being Black is not enough. All slavery is not created equal. The slavery that was practiced in Africa was completely different from the chattel slavery that was practiced in the U.S. And, while the same words may be used, even slavery that's talked about in the Bible, it's just completely different. And a lot of times, people will use the same word and not realize that those words have different meanings depending on the context and the execution of those words and the like. So I appreciate that.
Can I say one other thing about The
Yes,
Woman
sir.
King?
Absolutely.
Real quick. A Black production, Juvie Production, owned by Viola Davis and her husband. Viola Davis is one of the biggest stars on the planet. And she said, not only in her book, Finding Me, but she said in other places, she still has to push for roles. Those roles don't just come to her like they would come to the top white actresses. She still has to fight and claw for literally everything. And if she doesn't write it and create it herself, then it's a long wait. And so that's just another reason for us to support that film.
Yeah, I tell you what, man, I'm so excited to see that kind of cinematography being done, and excited to see us taking responsibility and kind of doing, for us, by us movies. And then our people and others supporting it commercially. Because at the end of the day, you can tell whatever story you want to tell, but you're not going to get the funding if it doesn't make money. And so, to see people come and view those is so important. Let's shift in the last few minutes we have. I want to talk a little bit about some of the key deaths in 2022. Those people that we will hold in memoriam. And I want to start with one of the latter ones because his death raised so many issues, and that's Stephen Twitch Boss. Twitch, for those of you who are listening, was the dancing DJ on the Ellen DeGeneres show and came to great fame and notoriety. Ellen ended her show this year. Not sure what role that even played in adding to his grief and depression, because again, grief is just the loss of normalcy. And so, the end of a show is a kind of death, and he reportedly had struggled with mental health issues in the past. But man, his death hit a lot of people hard when you talk about a 40-year-old who is seemingly at the top of his game, beautiful family, doing his thing on tour, and takes his life. Man, what was your thought when you saw that?
It speaks to the fact that it doesn't matter what people see on the outside. What's going on the inside is really what is at issue, or what's important, and that we as black, all people, but we as black people really need to step up our mental health game, self-care game, because not only his death in 2022, but Chelsea Christ. She was the 2019 winner of the Miss USA pageant. She was a correspondent on Extra. She was a former Division I athlete. She had all of this stuff going on. Beautiful young sister, competed for the Miss Universe pageant, and she took her life. And so it reminded me of, right here in Houston, at the University of Houston, Dr. Rita Walker. She does so much work on suicide and on our need for mental health. And I was just reminded, I did an interviewed her a few times, but she talks about how suicide rates in young black people, elementary middle school age black people is skyrocketing exponentially. And so when I heard about those two deaths, I thought about Dr. Walker's work and her words that we've really got to face this head on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think there's any question that, at least for me, it is the number one issue that we have to address this year in raising awareness around mental health, mental awareness, mental wellness, and how do we destigmatize it so that people recognize that no, it's self-care is not selfish. You got to take care of yourself, and how do we help and encourage each other? For me, one of the deaths, it's interesting, people are off the scene, for a while. They're not in the public limelight. They move from in front of the camera, sometimes to behind the camera. And then when you hear about their passing, it's like, oh, wow. Like, man, kind of takes you back. And, I thought about that when I heard about the passing of Max Julian and his role in the movie Superfly, which was like smack dab in the middle of what is called the black exploitation, film, genre, telling a story in a very colorful way. And maybe even more importantly than the movie, the soundtrack was the beast, right?
Yes.
was the beast, because we saw people for the first time that looked like us, not only making films, but scoring films. And those film scores, were classic, whether it's, Superfly or Freddy's Dead or, anything else off of that soundtrack with Curtis Mayfield was powerful. What were some of the deaths that just kind of took you back, made you think, made you reflect about just life and living and all of that?
Well, one of my crushes as a young man, Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura, her passing, that one really got me. And then you're talking about impact on the big screen, Sidney Poitier, but also Bill Russell. And all three of those were champions for our rights in different ways, but champions for our rights. And then one that's a little more personal, one of my really good friends, her father passed, and he's in our paper, Joe Thomas, who was a barber by trade, but he was a community champion by purpose, by passion, and he passed away. And so that one kind of got me as well. And then on the then Michael P. Williams as well, right here in Houston. Yeah. So yeah, those are the ones that really got me.
Yeah, I tell you what, that Bill Russell one, man, that dude was an activist and was working when it wasn't popular. I mean, when there was no cameras going along. I mean, this
Right.
dude going into places like Mississippi, man, and doing interracial basketball camps, man. When they wouldn't even, man, black kids and white kids couldn't even play together. And this dude
Right.
is on an interracial, basketball camp. This dude is like, no, if the whole team can't stay in this hotel, we're not staying here. If they can't eat here, we're not eating here. It's the stand he took with Jim Brown,
Right.
as they stood next to, Muhammad Ali. And Boston, has a reputation of being one of the most racist cities in the country, if
And
not in the
he led
world.
them to 11 championships in the belly of the beast. And when asked about it, he wasted no words. And he talks about how his house was broken in on multiple occasions, and with words calling him out of his name, etched on the front of the house and inside the house. And so for that racist city, and for him to 11 championships, Lord have mercy. When folk talk about the greatest ever, I mean, if it's all about winning, then there's no doubt who it is.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You say what you want to say, man. That dude, was unbelievable. And as a kid growing up in New York, man, you always hated the Boston Celtics, man, because
Of course you did.
Always won. But that dude was the champion, no question about it.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the freeing of Brittany Griner and that ordeal. That was amazing. There were people on both sides of the aisle, some saying, she should have been released. Of course, I think everybody agrees she should not have been detained for that, even if you just banned her from coming back to Russia, just send her home, right? Deport her.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of controversy around the prisoner exchange. And, you're exchanging a basketball player for an arms dealer, right? Did we get equal value for that? And we didn't get Paul Whelan. Just talk about the significance of that story as you watch that play out from the time that she was arrested moving forward until her release.
Well, from the defender's perspective, it was gut-wrenching, because she's a hometown girl from here, two-time Olympic champion, all-world WNBA, and now she's a political prisoner for something that most folk would say was barely a crime, if a crime at all. But what was gut-wrenching was no one was talking. And it was, the family didn't want to say anything because they didn't want to mess up opportunities to get their daughter home. And the coaches didn't want to say anything for the same reason. And there was a long stretch where folk in the WNBA weren't saying anything. And so it was, my fear was that we would literally forget about Brittany Griner being imprisoned. And it felt like that's what happened. So periodically we would do articles, she's still in jail. I mean, she's still in prison. So that was the gut-wrenching part. But like you said, man, Jubilee celebration, when we got the word that she was released, I'll never forget, the day that she was released, I went up to a restaurant around the corner from where we lived to pick up some food for my wife, and there was a sister that was working at the counter, and I leaned over and said, Brittany was released today. Biggest smile on her face. She said, I sure do. And it was one of those moments again for the culture where, oh my God, it was just so good to have her home. But you bring up a good point where folk were saying, well, did we get fair value? And there were some folk from various sides of the political spectrum who were like, we shouldn't have done any of this because she hates America. Well, they say that about all of us simply because, we're not part of their tribe.
Right.
And so I thought that was nonsense. But, folk that have any level of humanity in them would celebrate her release. And, Brittany Griner herself, she said, man, I am so thankful to be home. Lord have mercy. Do I wish that I can't remember his name, Paul Whelan.
Yeah, right. Paul Wheeling. Yeah.
Yeah, I so wish that he could have been brought home as well. But with social media today, everyone is an expert at everything, and so they trashed that exchange, but without having the personal expertise to make it happen themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So 2 stories before we go. One is the Houston Astros winning the World Series and Dusty, getting his ring. And I think for many in the Astros orb, redemption, the validation of the earlier World Series title and World Series appearances, to say that, hey, we don't have to cheat, to win.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't win because we cheated. We won because we were just better. But talk about the significance of that. If people in our community were excited about Brittany being released, the whole town was excited about the Astros winning.
Yeah, and exactly. And that was the narrative for the city of Houston, that this one validates, our greatness as a team. But personally, I was looking at it totally differently. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, been a Cincinnati Red fan since forever. And one of the worst moments as a Red fan was when that organization fired Dusty Baker after he had brought them out of the muck and mire, got them winning divisions, and took them to the playoffs on multiple years. The Reds fired him. I was a huge Dusty Baker fan before that, but I was an even bigger Dusty Baker advocate after he got let go by my favorite team. And so when I heard that he was hired on for the Astros, I was like, oh my gosh, well, this is perfect for the Astros and for him. And I was just so appreciative and thankful that he was able to win that World Series victory. And I'll just say this real quick, because I've always been a Reds fan, and back in the day, the Reds and the Astros were in the same division in the National League. I never liked the Astros. I only started being an Astro fan when my youngest daughter, out of nowhere, got into baseball, and the Astros were her team. And so because she was rooting for him, I was rooting for him too. But when they got Dusty, I really became an Astro fan. And so I'm still smiling about the fact that he got that World Series ring.
For me, what was most moving about it was it was almost a validation of the entire Negro baseball league. Like it's, I just saw Dusty as a continuation of that. It was bigger than Cito Gaston, when he won with the Toronto Blue Jays and was the first Black manager to win, or even, the manager at the Los Angeles Dodgers. It was just huge because I know Dusty's history and his relationship with Hank Aaron, who just recently passed, and Willie Mays, and just all of those guys, man. It was just, for me, powerful on so many levels that, we're still, it really, I don't even know if we fully grasp what all of that means. And especially for somebody who's viewed as a gentleman, who is the mentor of Bo Porter, who really was the architect of the development of people like Carrera and Altuve and Springer. Those were all players that Bo Porter had identified and had brought into the farm system. And for whatever reason, Jim Crane did not give him an opportunity to win with the team that he built and brought in AJ Hinch.
I'm so glad you said that. A friend of mine said when Bo Porter was hired, a friend of mine said what they're going to do is allow him to develop these players and then fire him as they come into their own. And I'll be darned if that isn't exactly what happened. And so people forget, and Bo Porter's still out there doing great work. He's got a baseball camp for young people that he runs, but no one talks about him. I'm so glad that you did not forget the name of Bo Porter. And I'll just say this about Dusty Baker. Our pro and college sports editor, Terrence Harris, has had, personal conversations with Dusty Baker and interviewed him multiple times. And Baker told him he didn't eat before the Astros called. He didn't know if he would get another chance to be a manager. He thought that, his days might be done. He knew he still had it in him, but he didn't know if another opportunity would make itself available. And so it's just incredible to think that a manager of his stature, a brother who has those connections all the way back to, like you said, the Negro Leagues, wouldn't have got a chance. And telling my age, I saw him play when he was with the Braves, he and Hank Aaron against the Reds in Riverfront Stadium a gazillion years ago.
Yeah. No, it was powerful. Let's close by talking about, I think, a person who has raised awareness of HBCU athletics like nobody else since desegregation, and that's Deion Sanders. Been those who've criticized him, saying he took the money. There are others who have lauded him and said, hey, man, somebody needs to build a statue of Deion somewhere because he has done a tremendous job, not just raising the profile of Jackson State, but raising the profile of the Black athletes at HBCUs and the value of HBCUs. Give me your take on that, because that's been a major story playing out over the last 3 years, but in particular now this past year with Deion making the decision that he was leaving Jackson State, going to the University of Colorado. What are your thoughts?
Depends on the day that you ask me. I'm on either side of that fence. And I think I will always celebrate all that Primetime brought to, all the eyes that he brought to HBCU sports, and his, just like Prairie View's Dr. Ruth Simmons, his refusal to accept less. He said, we cannot accept less. And just his fight for that level of equality is monumental. But then on the other side of that, I can't help but think, man, we lost an opportunity to say, to continue to build and to build HBCU sports back to the level it was before, all those conferences that would not allow Black players to come in. The SEC wouldn't even be the SEC without the Black players that came in.
Right.
But there was this whole movement of top tier high school athletes choosing to go to HBCUs. I remember that the twins, the young ladies who played volleyball, I don't remember their names. They originally signed with Texas A&M University. Then they said, we're going to Howard University. Just top tier high school athletes making the decision to go to HBCUs because they felt more comfortable in those spaces. And so I just, think when Deion left for the University of Colorado, we lost an opportunity to really continue to build that momentum. So that hurts.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you look at, for example, a Pro Football Hall of Fame, Pro Basketball Hall of Fame, and you look at those legends, many of them, especially in football, one who passed away this past year, Kenny Burroughs, was a track and football star at Texas Southern University, right? And the number of Hall of Famers that came out of small schools, came out of Grambling, came out of Southern, Mississippi Valley State, other schools like that in the SWAC, Alcorn State, that these places became the incubators where not just their physical talent was nurtured, but where they were nurtured as men and women, right? To become the men and women that they would eventually become. I'm like you. I don't throw any rocks at Deion, man, for leaving. If he left for the money, hey man, that's his right. You know, you got 5 million reasons to leave. You know, God bless you. I wish he would have stayed a couple more years. I wish he would have at least seen one of his graduating classes graduate. You know, one of the people he recruited as a freshman. But it also reveals, man, the disparity that we see. You know, because there's no way in the state of Mississippi they were going to make the highest paid state employee a black man who is coaching Jackson State University. You know, even though Nick Saban is the highest paid state employee at the University of Alabama, and the head coach at, you know, the University of Texas is typically the highest paid state employee in the state of Texas. The millions of dollars that Deion brought to Mississippi, not to Jackson State, to the state of Mississippi. You know, I mean, games sold out and then sold out everywhere he went. It was almost like, man, everybody should have been raising an offering to keep Deion at Jackson State. And we'll see if guys like Ed Reed, who's now going to Bethune-Cookman, if he's going to be able to generate that kind of excitement in Daytona Beach and, you know, be able to raise the profile of that program in the MEAC and, you know, see where it goes.
That's so symbolic, though, right? Deion bringing in all these funds, but you could say the same thing for the city of Jackson, right? Jackson is the biggest generator of funds for the state of Mississippi, yet Mississippi didn't want to do anything about cleaning up Jackson's water. So Deion's kind of symbolic of all that.
Yeah. All right, man, as we close, just give us some thoughts on how we move forward, lessons learned out of 2022, and how do we continue to fight in 2023?
Lord have mercy. Lessons. If 2022 was the year of the white backlash, I would say 2023 has to be the year that we stand up and claim our own. And I would say 4 things that I said in a sermon I preached recently: breathe, stretch, see, and move. Breathing reminds us, when you consciously breathe, it reminds us that we have way more power and control than we think we do, because we can decide what comes into our bodies and into our orbits, and we can also decide what we put out into the world. Stretching is one of those things. Physically, that's one of the most important things you can do, but very few people think and realize just how important it is. But you also have to stretch mentally, emotionally, stretch your dreams, stretch your imaginations, seeing beyond the visible, seeing bigger dreams and bigger hopes for yourselves, and then move. Because when you are in the process of moving, you are beyond just thinking about it. You are beyond positive positive ideas. This is what I want to do. When you're moving, you're actually doing the darn thing. So my advice for us would be to breathe, to stretch, to see, and to move.
Well, I'm sure somebody wrote that down, and that may become their mantra for 2023, man. Breathe, stretch, see, and move. Brother Minister Oswald Walker, man, thank you so much for being with me today on Real
Thank
World
you.
Real Talk, man. Appreciate you. And looking forward to a very positive, progressive, profitable 2023, man. Appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you too.
The late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it. I always add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. And man, the fight for your health, your well-being, the fight to, as Brother Oswald Walker said, to breathe, to stretch, to see, to move, fighting for your own sanity and sanctity is a fight worth engaging in. Here's one of the things, though, I want to remind you of. Nothing great happens haphazardly. Nothing great happens accidentally. You got to put the work in. You got to put the time in. You got to put the effort in to make it happen. So if you want 2023 to be next level living for you, I hope you're ready to make next level commitment. If you want greater things from God, I hope you're willing to make a greater commitment to him. And I hope you're willing to put the work in to become the best you can possibly be. This is Dr. DZ Cofield for Real World, Real Talk, signing off. Until next time, God bless is my prayer.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real World, Real Talk. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes every week. Follow us via social media using the @RWRTDZ username on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To submit any comments, questions, sponsor opportunities, or future show suggestions, visit us online at rwrtdz.com or via email at info@rwrtdz.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you've been inspired to be the change you want to see in the world today. Until next time, be real, keep it real, and stay real.